Hey, what's up? In today's video, I'd love to share with you the game played by Robert Fischer as white and how he crushed his opponent in just a couple of moves with my most favorite opening, the Bishop's opening. Now, the Bishop's opening arises from these first opening moves, Pawn e4, Pawn e5, and after that, instead of the usual move Knight to f3, Fischer played Bishop c4, which is called the Bishop's opening for obvious reasons. And what's really remarkable about this game is that Black played all the most natural moves. He played Knight f6, attacking the pawn while defending the pawn on the center of the board with their other knight. Black played bishop to c5. And here's an interesting moment. Instead of playing some move like pawn d3 or knight to f3, Fischer played pawn f4. And I think it's a great opening for you to use because this game was actually played in a simul in New York, and Fischer was playing this simultaneous exhibition on the 34 game boards, and he won all of these games. And so I think it is remarkable that against an amateur player, he chosen to play this opening, not some solid Rilo pass, or some positional strategic opening, but this one, the really aggressive one. And I always highlight that when you watch games of Carlsen, Caruana, etc., they're playing in different style, different openings, and I do not recommend that you just copy them because, again, their situation is totally different. On amateur level, playing this kind of an aggressive openings, challenging your opponents early in the game, dragging them out of their opening knowledge is a great thing to do. So f4 essentially attacks this pawn on e5, and Black needs to do something about that. In case they accept this pawn sacrifice on f4, that really doesn't work that well for Black, because White can play d4, either right away or on the next move, which will hit this bishop, give White these nice beautiful pawns in the middle of the board, as well as open up their dark squared bishop, which can get the pawn back on the next move. Potentially White can also push the central pawn forward and drive away the knight from f6. All in all, this definitely gives White a lot of advantage. Therefore, Black did not play this move, he did not accept this pawn sacrifice. And what we got then is something similar to the King's Gambit actually, but it's an improved version of the King's Gambit because Black should not even accept this pawn sacrifice, and therefore you get a nice attacking position without any sacrifices. Anyway, Black needs to defend this pawn, therefore Black in the game played pawn d6, and Fischer responded knight to f3, putting more pressure to the central pawn. Now, what can Black do about that? Well, naturally, they're going to either play knight c6 to defend the pawn with their knight, or develop the bishop, which is something that Black player actually did in the game. He played bishop g4, but actually it doesn't really matter because anyway, your opponents are very likely to play both of these moves, so it doesn't matter which one they start from. In the game, he started from bishop g4, Fischer played pawn h3, and here we can see another interesting advantage of having this pawn on f4 versus having it on its original square on f2. Black is now completely forced to take here on f3. They can't play the usual move bishop h5 because in that case the bishop will be trapped after g4, attacking the bishop, has to go here, now f5, and the bishop is locked there, it's trapped, and you just win a piece. Therefore, that's not an option, so let's get it back. And now after pawn h3, instead, Black has to give up their bishop, which is nice, because now you got two bishops advantage. And now Black played knight c6, White responded pawn d3. Which is a remarkable move, actually. It looks like a very standard move, but in fact, it sets a very interesting trap. It's very tempting for Black here to play knight to d4, which double attacks the queen as well as this pawn on c2. Black certainly expects you to move your queen back, all the way back to d1, just to defend this pawn. But instead, Fischer played the move queen g3, which usually gives White a winning attack. It was the case for this particular game, and it is the case in most of the other games as well. Theoretically, some really advanced opponents maybe will find a way to hold Black's position, but I'd say the opponents below 2000 probably are not going to be able to hold it. White has a very dangerous attack here. Now, you give up this pawn on c2. That's an obvious sacrifice, but for that, you're going to grab this pawn on g7, and your queen is going to be in the close proximity to Black's king. So essentially you can even deliver some sort of the scholar's checkmate on f7. Also, it's worth mentioning that it's not that easy for Black to somehow get away from this attack, because what can they really do? If they castle here, the king is not going to be in safety there, because now we've got the queen looking there, the bishop pointing towards it, our dark squared bishop is ready to also join the party, we have the semi-open f-file where our rook can stand, and altogether, you can easily see by the number of these arrows that Black is under the massive attack. So it's not going to solve the problem. Also, if I take this move back, if they try knight h5, trying to double attack your queen and this pawn, that doesn't really change anything as well. You can just go queen g4, and nothing really changes. You still hit the knight. This pawn on g7 is still under the attack if knight goes away. Therefore, it doesn't really help black. Okay, therefore, your opponents may decide that, hey, I'm gonna just go ahead and take this because it looks very tempting, and again, there aren't many other obvious options for black to choose from, so black may decide to at least win some material, and also to attack your king. So knight takes c2, check to the king has to go, king goes to d1, it also from here attacks the knight, therefore now black needs to grab this rook on a1, and so far it looks good, but after queen g7 you start this very strong and sudden attack. Now from g7 we're hitting the rook, we're also hitting the square f7, so queen takes f7 would be a really big threat, because that would be a checkmate. Now black played rook to f8 to cover both their weaknesses. Now Fischer traded here in the center to open up the f-file, followed by rook to f1. We're bringing up another piece into play, attacks the knight, attacking here the pawn on f7, and for that reason the knight cannot really go away, because if the knight goes, that'll open up this f-file for our attack, and we can just grab this pawn and it's going to be checkmate very soon, just within a few moves. Therefore black can't do that. Let's take it back. Instead, Mike played bishop to e7, defending the knight, and Fischer continued bishop g5 with the same purpose, to hit this knight, force it to move away, and after that we can get to the f7 pawn end as well as the king. Now, black decided to just go all out in this desperate attempt to complicate matters, because if not, it's really hard to say what else can black do. We're just gonna grab this knight on f6. The other knight of black on a1 is also kind of trapped, it can get out, right, because all these squares are already controlled by white. Therefore, this knight potentially is actually in danger. We can even move our king there if we want to and grab it. But there is no need to do that, because we're going to attack black's king here. So after bishop g5, we want to grab the knight. It can't go away, because then we're going to grab another pawn on f7. And for that reason, black was desperate and decided, okay, let's give it a try and just complicate matters, and let's just try to have some fun. Fischer recaptured, followed by f5. Black is still trying to do something to get out of this desperate attempt, and Fischer calmly grabbed this pawn on h7. It's not that white cares about this pawn that much, but much rather white wants to get this g6 square for their queen, which is no longer defended by the pawn, and for that reason black is defenseless, because whatever he does in the game, he captured this bishop on g5, queen g6 check, and it's gonna be a checkmate. In fact, black resigned right here, because after king d7 there is queen e6, very nice and quick checkmate. It's interesting how white managed to create this attack seemingly out of nothing, and black seemingly did nothing wrong by playing just most natural, most standard opening moves. And that's why I'm saying that this is a really great opening for you to model. And I think there is a reason why Fischer chosen this against an amateur player, because he knew that black is not gonna be able to solve the problems and to hold black's position being under this massive and unexpected attack. Let's have a quick recap here. Therefore, after the first opening moves, pawn e4, pawn e5, we're going bishop c4, entering the bishop's opening. Then after their pawn plays knight f6 or any other move, doesn't really matter, knight c3. And here you play this key move, pawn f4, getting something like the King's Gambit or the Vienna Gambit, but an improved version of it, because black can't even really capture the pawn. Or, I mean, he can, but it's not advantageous for black. After pawn d6, we're playing knight f3, putting more pressure onto this pawn. Whether black goes bishop g4 here or knight c6 doesn't really matter. If they go knight c6 first, you play pawn d3. And anyway, thanks to these pawns, you're having this space advantage on the king side and an ability to bring the bishop there in the future, the open f-file for your pieces. This bishop is also hitting the king side. All in all, you have a lot of stuff there. And as soon as black goes bishop g4, you can play the Fischer's attacking plan, pawn h3, kicking this bishop. It has to take here, queen takes. And now, if black tries to counterattack, it kind of fails because of queen g3, and it turns out that your attack over opponent's king is more powerful compared to black's attack of your pawn and rook. So that's basically it. Now, I've got another video with the 5 best opening traps in the bishop's opening, which I highly recommend that you check out later after watching this one, because there I cover also some other options of black, which I did not analyze here, as well as some additional ideas for white. So that would really complement this video really well, and you would be nicely prepared to play yourself this opening right after watching these videos. And to wrap this up, I've got a really cool puzzle that's gonna make your day. And here's our today's puzzle of the day. It is white to move and win in 3 moves. It is checkmate in 3. Therefore, if you can find the solution, please write it down in the comments below. And if you can't find it, just scroll to the comments and somebody will surely point this out. Now, to wrap this up, if you haven't watched my most classical video about the bishop's opening, I definitely recommend that you click over there and do this right now, because this is a must. It's going to give you a really solid opening repertoire for white to play against Pony 4, Pony 5. Wishing you a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon. Ciao.